Penny Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series. My name is Christina Hamilton, the series director. Today we continue our foray seeking transformation as we present artist and hybridist Saya Woolfolk. Today is a homecoming of sorts, as Saya is actually a University of Michigan progeny, as both of her parents are University of Michigan alumni, and so in a manner of speaking, the alma mater figures large in her existence, and in her chimeric fashion, she could easily appear as a baby Wolverine. I was so touched when I found this out. I drove her around the campus trying to figure out all the places her parents would have hung out. We had a fun little and there were your parents in the Law Quad, and there were your parents at Dominic's, and we covered the bases. Today, I want to thank our partners for their support. We have the University of Michigan Museum of Art, the Institute for the Humanities, and the Chelsea River Gallery. Yeah, all great friends of the series, I must say. Just a couple brief announcements before we have Saya join us on stage. As we are zooming to the end of the semester, lots of student work coming up to see, and tonight and tomorrow evening, you should join us for the Stamp School Winter Inter-Arts Showcase. These are our Inter-Arts performance students. An amazing bunch. I know it's going to be a great show. This is tonight and tomorrow night at the Duderstadt at 7:30 p.m. It's a brief show. It's only an hour long. Tonight there's going to be a talk back afterwards. There's a wide range of original work bridging the visual and performing arts. Next week, on Monday, we have one of our Penny Stamps special events. Tracy Snelling, an artist who is here on campus doing a residency at the Institute for Humanities. She will be opening an exhibition on Monday after she gives her Penny Stamps talk. This is going to not be happening here. This will be Monday evening, 5:10 p.m. at the Art Museum in the Helmut Stern Auditorium. And then we will all parade over to the Institute for Humanities following the talk for the opening of her exhibition. So please do join us there on Monday. And the remainder of next week, well, 55th Ann Arbor Film Festival opens Tuesday evening right here, and then just takes over the rest of the week till Sunday, so hope to see you all here. We will have a special Penny Stamps presentation as part of the film festival with the New Negress Film Society, so don't miss that. Today, we will have a regular Q&A, so come and join us in the screening room as per usual, directly following the presentation here. And now to give you a little background on our guest today, Saya Woolfolk uses science fiction and fantasy to reimagine the world in multiple dimensions. With the multi-year projects No Place, The Empathics, and Chimatech, she has created the world of the Empathics, a fictional race of women who are able to alter their genetic makeup and fuse with plants. This is the transformation I'm talking about. With each body of work, Woolfolk continues to build the narrative of these women's lives and questions the utopian possibilities of cultural hybridity. She's exhibited widely at PS1 MoMA, Deitch Projects, Contemporary Art Museum Houston, Contemporary Art Center Cincinnati, the Brooklyn Museum, Asian Art Museum, Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, the Studio Museum in Harlem, Frist Center for the Visual Arts, Yerba Buena Center, the Newark Museum, Third Streaming, MCA San Diego, MoCA Taipei, and was part of Performa in 2009. She's been written about widely in the New Yorker and Sculpture Magazine, Art Forum, Art News, New York Times, Huffington Post, Art 21's blog. What more could you want? She's recently completed a new video installation commissioned for the Seattle Art Museum, and she is a recipient of the NYFA grant in Digital and Electronic Arts. She's represented by Leslie Toncono Artworks, and she teaches, on top of all that, at Parsons, the New School for Design. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Saya Woolfolk.
Hi, guys. Ooh, this just actually fell on me. Maybe there's a way to pull it back up. Yeah, it just kind of.
There we go.
There we go.
Where you want it? No.
No.
No, I think it's actually right. There we go. Oh, lovely.
I think we got it. All right. Hey. Yeah. Go blue, right? All right. So I actually wanted to start my talk with a picture of my parents here at the University of Michigan. This is a photo from my dad's law school graduation. He's flanked by his parents, my grandfather, Joseph Wohlfalk, and my grandmother, Anna Wohlfalk, and my mom, Shigeko Wohlfalk. It's a really special photograph to me. It's something that I carry with me everywhere I go. And I also think that the way that I kind of started my practice had a lot to do with my interest in thinking about my own family history, and the way that my family is very much a kind of intercultural, intersectional family of immigrants. So when I first started making work, most of my work was made in textiles. This is a photograph of my grandparents in Japan's textile company in Gifu, Japan, in post-war Japan. And in college, when I started making work, textiles became the first and easiest way for me to begin to make these bodies that I wanted to make, these new bodies that represented a lived experience of sexuality. I was looking at a lot of feminist artists at the time, Yayoi Kusama, as well as Eleanor Antin. So this is a series called The Pornographic Finger Puppets, and a detail shot of them, and a costume called The Wrath. So right after I graduated from college, I spent a year in New York City working for a nonprofit called Public Color, basically revitalizing inner city public schools with mural projects, and also taking classes at FIT. While I was at FIT, I started making these full-body costumes, and also began to superimpose these costumes that were worn into digital landscapes. So I was using a kind of early form of Photoshop that wasn't very versatile, but it was really exciting to take something that was analog. I immediately began to do something where I would take something that's analog and bring it into a digital landscape. In 2002, I moved to Chicago right after 9/11 and started looking at the world around me to try and integrate the symbolic language that I was seeing. So there were gas masks everywhere because it was just after 9/11, and there were advertisements where you could buy gas masks to protect yourself from the impending disaster. I had also never seen African American collectibles before, and going to graduate school in the Midwest, I was kind of surrounded by them for the first time. And moving through the School of the Art Institute of Chicago's museum, I kept seeing these incredible Nkisi power sculptures every day. I took the things that I was seeing, all of the material, all of the kind of symbols, and began integrating them into these gouache on paper paintings. So I made a series of about 10 20 by 26 inch gouache on paper paintings. And you can see that the symbols are kind of processed through my imagination and reconstructed into this fantastical other landscape. I was simultaneously taking the things that I was making two-dimensionally and then translating them into three-dimensional costumes. This costume is called Consumer. And I presented the costume in a storefront window display on Michigan Avenue. So I wanted to take the costume that had been reconstructed and bring it back into the landscape, into the real world, where I had drawn my inspiration. Collaboration also became a major part of my practice when I was a graduate student at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And so the first project I did collaboratively was called The Pleasure Center. It was a kind of science fiction-inspired, large-scale inflatable installation with costumes and performance. People would walk into this large-scale inflatable, after they had given away their bodies. So they had to kind of sign away their bodies and adorn themselves with these new bodies. And in the new bodies were vibrators that they could basically use to vibrate each other through this semi-permeable membrane. Once I began to do collaborative work, I brought that kind of expansive kind of potential back into my own practice. And this piece is from 2003 and is called Love Monster. I was reading a lot of psychoanalytic theory at the time as well. So it's this kind of overdeveloped mothering instinct that was represented by this really plush performative object. The Love Monster was integrated into an installation called Lovescape. And I started finding objects and manipulating them to have new kind of symbolic meanings. These are the tricksters, which were originally 3 Christmas reindeer. And I also began choreographing performances based on the ways that people would actually feel inside of the costumes that they were putting on. So this piece is Sweethearts, and there are 2 lovers inside of the costume that are attached by an umbilical tongue, and they can't see each other. The choreography was based on basically how they began to interact with one another once they were asked to inhabit this conjoined body. When I graduated from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, I was invited to go to Brazil. My husband's an anthropologist, and he was doing research in northeastern Brazil. And so he invited me to come and live with him in his research site. And so I started thinking about what it would look like to live in a place like northeastern Brazil, in Maranhão. So the first thing I did was I collected home and garden magazines and kind of clipped images from those magazines and created a gouache on paper painting based upon those images. So this is a kind of literal imagining of a place, which obviously is a misrepresentation of the place based upon something which has absolutely nothing to do with the place. I then made costumes based on that painting, and the costumes were also a part of an installation called Paradise Imagined, and they were made while I was at Skowhegan in 2004. And so not only was I being inspired by my imagining of this place where I was moving to, but I was also thinking about the landscape I was inhabiting. We were kind of covered in bugs, and almost everybody's studio had Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights in it. And I don't know if you guys know, but it's kind of sex camp, so it was a really, really interesting experience. And so these 2 costume figures first are sewn closed. They open themselves up, sew themselves together, and then they negotiate this kind of large pink mat. It's kind of a non-location landscape as a single sculptural unit. This was how it was installed at the MCA in Chicago. So it included a performance, the costumes, video, as well as the original work on paper. So you can see that once I actually was in the landscape, I was actually living in Brazil, I started to try to render what I was seeing outside of my window. This also is a representational system, and it's also not particularly accurate, but it was a kind of an attempt to actually look at something at a place and represent that place. This was the landscape. This is actually where we lived. This was our house, and it was a really incredibly beautiful place to live for a year. And simultaneously, I was looking for other paintings that people had done who were outsiders, representing people from that place. So this is a Dutch painting of a Tupi Indian woman, and this is my version of that painting. I then received funding from a Joan Mitchell Foundation grant and a Fulbright to study folkloric performance traditions in northeastern Brazil. And I began to help folkloric performance practitioners make their costumes. The premise of my Fulbright was that I was deeply interested in, and continue to be deeply interested, in the ways that the folkloric practitioners were thinking deeply playfully about very difficult social conditions. So a lot of the performances have to do with the history of slavery in northeastern Brazil, in Maranhão. So this specifically is from something called Bumba Meu Boi, these images. I then began to integrate that language into my works on paper, and also sought icons in our own North American imaginary that I could use within the context of my work. So this is a half-black, half-white topsy-turvy doll, and my own version of that half-white, half-black topsy-turvy doll. It's in a miniature, it's kind of maquette. And from that object came a large installation called Winter Garden Hybrid Love Objects, presented for the Greater New York Show at PS1 MoMA, in which two costume figures kind of go back and forth and attempt to take care of, love, and also attempt to destroy this incredibly large topsy-turvy doll. So the first series of works that I just showed were kind of vignettes. They were projects that I really worked on to kind of understand the different facets of the ideas that I wanted to explore. I would spend maybe 2 or 3 months on each project. And when I came back to the United States in 2006, I decided that I really wanted a long-term, larger project that I could work on for many years. And so the first project I worked on from 2006 to 2008 is a project called No Place. And this is a portal to that place. And I documented it with an anthropologist named Rachel Lears. So the portal was made out of recycled materials from my home. And there was a Utopia vendor who sold tourist trinkets to this world on the streets of New York City. I made a cartography of No Place based upon the 7 ancient wonders of the world, which were the kind of 7 first tourist destinations. And then started building installations based on those paintings. So this is called Self in Landscape. And this is called A No Place Pre-Constructed, The Ideal City, and The Love Machine. It was my studio at the Studio Museum in Harlem. And the way that the film was constructed, or the way that the film was made, was by inviting people to come to the studio and talk about their ideas of utopia. Based upon their ideas, the logic and narrative of No Place emerged. And so the people who gave us their ideas also became the actors in the ethnographic film. This is Rachel, the anthropologist, and I as psychedelic naturalists. And we shot these photos in Kmart, which was kind of important. I mean, it was pretty important at the time because a lot of the work looks as if it's very expensive to produce, but it very much was about trading labor with friends and using very mundane materials to create this utopian vision. Here's some stills from Ethnography of No Place. And the people of No Place from these conversations became part plant, part human, people who or not necessarily people, they were humanoids who change gender and color and turn back into the landscape when they die. They exchange symbolic language with their ancestors, who are the two figures from the Winter Garden Hybrid Love Objects installation, and are seedlings in their adolescent form. This is a Noplacian anatomy, as well as the final installation. So this is kind of the final iteration of No Place, was to present it as a immersive installation with the 6-part ethnographic film and all of the props and costumes.
This portal is the threshold of their world. Let's take a look at the glyphs. Don't worry if it's difficult at first. Come, follow me. Notice the way the florets desire the organelles. The large petaloid members of the landscape open to the self. The body perishes with each gesture. Sorry and thanks are insufficient to express gratitude for love.
Hi. So that's an excerpt from a 30-minute ethnographic film called The Ethnography of No Place. The next project I worked on and continue to work on is called The Empathics, and it's got an end date. It says 2009 to 2013, but actually the projects that I've been working on now really do continue to be a part of the Empathics series. So once this utopia was established, once there were a kind of a set of rules about what this future would look like, I started thinking about how people in the present could actually mutate and become more like the people of this future world. And I began to collaborate with dancers. So this was the first piece called A Ritual of the Empathics, where a group of dancers were given the story of No Place and watched the ethnographic film. And based upon their responses to the film, a choreography emerged. I also started to lead tours of the installations as this kind of anthropologist of No Place, and collaborated with biologists to actually think about what kinds of mutations could occur in order for the Institute of Empathy, which is the Institute of the Empathics, to further the possibility of interspecies hybridization. The Institute of Empathy was established as a kind of online repository for the knowledge of the empathics, and they lent their material culture to the Montclair Art Museum. In the exhibition, there were two sets of didactics. There were blue didactics and there were gray didactics. In the blue didactics, the empathics told their story from their perspective, so in the first person. So the first diorama you saw was called Herniated Consciousness, and I won't go too far into the details now because I'll show you a short film that describes the process of mutation of the empathics and how they self-select into becoming empathics. But in this exhibition called the Institute of Empathy, there were photographs, objects, works on paper, that were called pages from the book Empathetic Plant Alchemy. Costumes, this piece is called Eye Body, as well as photographs that showed the costumes in use. This is an installation called Aerial Display and Star Compulsion. The final installation in this exhibition was a reconstruction of the Institute of Empathy in Greene County, New York. We did performances in the exhibition, which were kind of reenactments of empathic culture, as well as a planetarium show at the Newark Museum's planetarium called Hybrid Cosmology.
On behalf of the Empathics, welcome. This video documents an exhibition about our biological transformation and the history of empathic culture. The Institute of Empathy was founded to excavate a burial site in the woods of upstate New York. The bones we found appeared human, but we came to realize they had an unfamiliar genetic chimerism. Not only did the bones contain the genetic material of two distinct organisms, but the organisms came from two different kingdoms of the natural world, human and plant. At first, we merely studied this discovery. But repeat contact with a fungus emanating from the bones stimulated our own physical transformation. These fungal spores circulated throughout our bodies, slowly mutating our DNA. We decided to name our new species Empathics, because our transformation has rendered us extremely receptive to the introduction of foreign genetic material. We subsequently refined this biological process into 4 steps so that any ordinary human may elect to undergo the experience of interspecies hybridization, thus choosing to become an empathic. The first physical manifestation of becoming an empathic is to develop multiple heads with multiple brains. For example, one brain may contain information on being a plant, while the second brain may contain information on being a human. in-between state allows us to tolerate our experience of crossing species and also enables us to move effortlessly between human cultures. Here you see a member of our community growing her second head. She is surrounded by trees, evoking the woods of Greene County, New York, where our Institute of Empathy is located, as well as baskets and other objects commonly found in empathic habitats. To enter ordinary human society, empathics often wear baskets on our second heads. This allows us to hide them from the general public. The second important aspect of our biological mutation process is called utopia conjuring therapy, or UCT. In this therapy, a senior empathic guides a junior empathic through a kaleidoscopic lucid dream. These guided dreams organize the heterogeneous mental content of the junior empathic, synthesizing her competing sets of genetic information. We then objectify these dreams by making visionary paintings. In the third stage of mutation, after many sessions of utopia conjuring therapy, we synthesize our heterogeneous experiences into a unified state. As a result, some of us develop petal-covered wings that allow us to participate in aerial displays. This unification also allows us to shed our second heads and molt our skins. We collect and embellish these sheds, and then sell them to support our research into interspecies hybridization. Upon completion of utopia conjuring therapy, the empathics physically activate the knowledge we have attained through our lucid dreams. This fourth and final stage culminates in our joining together to create one of several physical configurations, or formations. The star compulsion formation is a way for us to activate the things we see in our visions. Through our continued research into empathic genetics and culture, we hope to offer insight into our hybridizing world.
So one of the comments that I continuously received about that installation was this desire from the audience to kind of historicize the empathics, partially because of how they were physically manifested and the aesthetics that I had chosen to use to construct the artwork. And I really wanted to resist that with the next series of work. And so the first thing that I started working with was basically building installations that incorporated the objects from the Institute of Empathy, but also contained large-scale video projection. I started also working with video game designers so that the empathic language was integrated into this kind of video game landscape, this 3D animated video game landscape. So this is an installation, or this was an installation called Chimera, which had a video that went alongside it in which a junior empathic learns to know herself to be a chimera. From there, the Kaimatech project started to evolve. Kaimatech is the corporate hub of the Empathics, of the Institute of Empathy. And the first thing that the Empathics do is they download Judy Chicago's dinner party plates into their operating system. And they begin to have these kind of large-scale beta launches. So this is an installation called Kaimatech Beta Launch that was at Smack Mellon Gallery with kind of these colossal videos, as well as the sculptural components from Chimera. And one of the things I really loved about this was how people began to integrate themselves into the large-scale video projections. And we began to lead meditation sessions as a part of the Kaimatech technology, the Life Product system, in which people went through a guided meditation with a Kaimatech operator. I also began to make these different machines as a part of the Life Product system. This is the first machine called the Hybridization Machine, and it was a collaboration with DJ Spooky. And so there's this virtual DJ on the top right who remixes the user's body with kind of sound and color. And I'll play the video. So it's a 2-channel video. And on the right side of the video I'm about to show you is the video that would be in the top right of this sculpture, and the video on the left is on the body. So this was my exhibition. I currently have an exhibition up at the gallery I work with, Leslie Tonkonow Gallery, and this was my last show at the gallery, and it was called Kymatech Hybridity Visualization System. And it was basically an accumulation or a kind of culmination of a series of life products. These collages were digitized. They're called untitled avatars, and put, basically animated into something called the Avatar Download Station. There was a virtual reality station, as well as something called the combustion chamber, which you'll see in a video called Life Products by Kymatech. And here are some stills from that video of a user using the Life Product system, and a Kymatech operator activating the combustion chamber so that a user can actually begin to interact with the hybridization machine as well as the Avatar Download Station.
Self-transformation. Chimeric virtual existence. Choose, manipulate, and enhance identity components to inhabit new combinations of cognitive and cultural consciousness. Kymatech's patented system makes our interspecies and intersubjective hybridization available to all. This revolutionary process starts in fluorescing mines. We've perfected the extraction of a previously untapped natural resource. Clean minerals that produce a gaseous fuel that makes human hybridization possible. Kymatech's laboratory houses the largest collection of fluorescent hybridization ore in the world. Our skilled technicians are always ready to refine the materials with state-of-the-art activation technology. Your journey to self-transformation begins here. First, the glass combustion chamber releases the vapor you'll need to use the deluxe hybridization machine. This machine gently remixes your already existent traits, wiping them clean with colors, shapes, and soundscapes. Avatar Download Station then uses identity algorithms to produce downloadable virtual avatars, so you can explode physical limits, so you can blur psychocultural boundaries. Kymatech, empathetic connectivity for the hybridized post-humanist age.
So that video, Life Products by Kymatech, was presented as a part of an installation that I recently did. It was commissioned by the Seattle Art Museum, but presented at the Brooklyn Museum recently. And it's an installation called Virtual Chimeric Space. And this is kind of where I am in my practice right now, and I'll probably go through the last series of slides pretty quickly. And it's a large-scale installation. It's a video installation, so the entire back wall is a projection. And it was activated by a dancer. Last summer, I also presented my work in Times Square as a part of a series that the Times Square Alliance developed. And it's a video installation called the Kyma Cloud. So all of the parts, all of the empathic kind of videos that I've been working on for the last 10 years were accumulated into a video installation that was presented in Times Square. Simultaneously, I worked on a project for Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, which was a live activation of the Fulton Center Terminal in downtown Manhattan. So while the Kyma Cloud video installation was being presented in Times Square, there was an activation of the train station by live dancers interacting with and dancing with a virtual crystal. And the virtual crystal is a fragment from the Kyma Cloud that can be seen through an augmented reality application called Refract. And when the dancers were not present, there were banners that told people how to download the application, as well as kind of told them about the station as a human and solar energy collecting device. I recently presented the costumes as a part of a solo museum exhibition at the Sheldon Museum. And so these are also augmented reality garments. And I've started kind of constructing potential architecture for virtual and augmented reality experiences that I will build in upstate New York. This is a 3D rendering of that building, as well as the images from my current exhibition at Leslie Tonkano, which includes augmented reality garments, projections that are bodies that are partially coming out of the cloud and partially analog bodies. These are bodies called Kyma Cloud Crystal Body A and B. They're supposed to be bodies that have been printed out of the Kyma Cloud, so they're part printed, like 3D printed bodies, but then they're also embellished, hand embellished. So the Kyma Cloud has now become this kind of repository for all of this digital information and material that I'm using to create these digital bodies that also have the potential to become analog bodies. This is a still from a video called Kyma Cloud, which is a body being programmed in the cloud. That body, that skin, is then placed over a kind of virtual body in the installation. And also is printed on silk. So these are they're called cloud skins. They're 2 silk pieces that are the cloud skins that have been printed out back into the analog world. So there's this kind of taking things, putting them into the digital world, bringing them back out into the analog world, and seeing how they've been remixed. This is another one of the crystal bodies. I've recently also been experimenting in public art and working in the kind of corporate realm, and so I'm just going to kind of quickly go through some of those projects. These are renderings for stainless steel windscreens for the MTA, and the first one just went up. The MTA is like the subway system in New York City. The first one just went up in East New York. This is a digital rendering for a large-scale digital ceramic tile mosaic with hand-built elements for a public school in Queens. These are some pictures of the ceramic tiles, as well as a rendering of the site. This is an installation that's currently was purchased by Facebook, so it's in their offices. Vinyl wallpaper for the offices of Spotify. Packaging design called packaging for an intercultural society for Perrier, a launch page for WeTransfer, an advertisement for Cadillac, and recently album art for Sufjan Stevens, Nico Mali, Bryce. Basically, it's a collaborative album called Planetarium. So this is for Venus, which I've been working on. So I've really, been making work in all sorts of different ways, and I'm really happy to answer any questions in the next room. Thank you so much for listening to me speak.